In this podcast episode, Joe Rogan sits down with Ed Calderon, a Mexican-American former paramilitary operative and expert on the complex realities of Mexico's ongoing struggles with cartels, politics, and social turmoil. The conversation weaves through a wide range of topics, providing listeners with deep insight into Mexico's history, its current challenges, and the entangled relationship with the United States. Below is a detailed summary of 12 key subjects discussed during this engrossing episode. Calderon opens the conversation by exploring Mexico's rich indigenous history, challenging common misconceptions about the Aztecs and Mayans. He emphasizes that the term Aztec is a modern designation for Mexica tribes who migrated south from northern regions. These groups arrived to find well-established civilizations with impressive architectural feats and complex societies. Contrary to simplified narratives, Mexico's history involves numerous tribes with diverse cultures, many predating the Aztec Empire. The discussion focuses on the mysterious abandonment of sites like the City of the Gods, the enormous pyramids of the Sun and Moon, and the advanced engineering skills evidenced in places like Chichen Itza. Calderon delves into ceremonial practices, especially those involving psychedelic rituals and extreme forms of sacrifice, underscoring the role bloodletting and pain played in spiritual experiences. He draws parallels between indigenous religious customs and later Catholic influences, illustrating a unique syncretism in Mexican culture. One particularly intriguing subject is the Aztec death whistle, a haunting artifact producing terrifying sounds. Calderon explains how these whistles were reportedly used during flower wars, ritual battles aimed at capturing prisoners for sacrifice. By blowing these shrill whistles near enemy encampments, warriors would disrupt sleep, inducing fear and psychological exhaustion. This weaponization of sound reflects the ingenuity of indigenous tactics long before European contact. Calderon notes the whistle's animalistic qualities linked to jaguars and screeching owls, lending them a spiritual significance that went beyond practical warfare. The eerie, ghost-like noise could easily terrify unprepared foes, giving indigenous forces a psychological edge. The episode grapples with the brutal history of both indigenous groups and the effects of the Spanish conquest. Calderon challenges sanitized versions of history by emphasizing widespread human sacrifice and violence prevalent among the Aztecs and other tribes, including torture methods that today seem unimaginable. He highlights instances such as ritual sacrifices atop pyramids, suicides, and war-related atrocities designed to terrorize and maintain control. The history becomes even more complex with the arrival of the Spanish, who allied with tribes resentful of Aztec dominance. This alliance catalyzed the conquest but also led to a merging of cultures known as mestizaje, which created the modern Mexican identity, fraught with both pride and internal conflict. Calderon points out how Mexico's cultural psyche wrestles with the dual legacy of indigenous civilizations and European colonialism. Moving to modern times, Calderon sheds light on the violent evolution of Mexican cartels, tracing their origins and transformations from loosely organized gangs into militarized, sophisticated criminal enterprises. He discusses how paramilitary tactics, including territorial control, torture videos, and propaganda, have become tools not just for crime, but warfare within Mexico. The infiltration of former special forces and military personnel into cartels, such as the Zetas, many battle-tested operatives trained in elite U.S. courses, has significantly escalated the conflict's lethality. These groups introduced guerrilla warfare and complex organizational structures, drastically altering power dynamics. Calderon outlines how this militarization feeds ongoing cycles of violence and territorial disputes between various cartel factions. A substantial portion of the dialogue addresses the infamous Operation Fast and Furious, a controversial U.S. government initiative that allowed firearms to be trafficked into Mexico with purported aims of tracking them. Calderon recounts how this operation backfired disastrously, flooding Mexico with high-powered weapons, including Barrett 50 caliber rifles, that found their way into cartel hands. He shares personal experiences witnessing the devastating consequences, including losses of friends armed with these firearms. The episode explores theories about the motivations behind the operation, suggesting it may have been a political ploy or part of a covert destabilization strategy. These weapons have only contributed to intensifying cartel violence, undermining genuine law enforcement efforts. The pervasive corruption and cartel influence within Mexico's political landscape receives significant attention. Calderon reveals how criminal organizations have infiltrated every level of government, from mayors to police chiefs, effectively controlling large regions through both violence and political patronage. He narrates the chilling reality of cartel-backed candidates holding official positions, ensuring impunity and subverting state authority. Election seasons are marked by hundreds of political assassinations, demonstrating that political power struggles often boil down to battles between rival criminal factions. This deep entanglement complicates any efforts to address Mexico's security crises meaningfully. Calderon discusses the rise of the new Generation Cartel, a powerful and technologically adept criminal organization. This cartel capitalizes on lessons from predecessors and deploys advanced weaponry, including drones capable of dropping explosives, a tactic later adopted and refined by Ukrainian forces. He recounts encounters with recruited cartel members, including a young man trained in military camps with disconnects from society and experiencing severe trauma like PTSD and hearing loss. The innovation in Mexican cartel warfare, combined with organized training camps often supported by former military operatives, illustrates how crime groups morph into paramilitary forces equipped for sustained warfare. The fentanyl epidemic in the United States is linked to Mexican cartels' shifting methods and production strategies. Calderon explains how Mexican producers infused heroin with fentanyl to boost potency amid declining poppy yields, leading to widespread addiction and overdose deaths north of the border. The cartel's control of supply chains and ports facilitates the drug flow, with China supplying precursor chemicals and possible complicity in the trade. Calderon outlines how Mexican authorities crack down on domestic fentanyl distribution while being complicit or powerless to stop export to the U.S., where the crisis remains devastating. A critical and timely discussion revolves around immigration, including the recruitment tactics of cartels using social media platforms like TikTok to attract vulnerable individuals. Calderon shares stories of how impoverished youths are lured into cartel ranks after failed prospects in legitimate jobs. He critiques U.S. migration policies, highlighting the contradictions between mass deportations and simultaneous border openings. The conversation exposes how migrants, often drugged to prevent resistance, are moved through dangerous corridors, while political manipulation of immigrant populations affects electoral outcomes. The complexities of immigration intertwine with cartel operations and socio-political aims on both sides of the border. The episode addresses the fraught diplomatic and security relationship between the U.S. and Mexico, especially regarding anti-cartel efforts. Calderon discusses the controversial extrajudicial arrest of cartel leader El Chapo's partner, El Mayo Zambada, in Texas, and the subsequent firefights and unrest in Mexico. He warns about the risks of direct U.S. military action on Mexican soil, noting the potential for transforming organized crime groups into freedom fighters and escalating anti-American sentiment. The mistrust and infiltration of legitimate institutions by cartels compound the challenges, suggesting that any intervention must be nuanced and collaborative to avoid catastrophic fallout. Throughout the podcast, Calderon conveys the human cost of cartel violence and systemic corruption. He describes entire communities decimated by mass murders, disappearances, and normalized brutality. Missing persons posters line public spaces, and forensic systems are overwhelmed or complicit. The psychological impacts affect not only victims, but also survivors, including former cartel members suffering trauma with little access to healthcare or rehabilitation. The social fabric of many regions has been irreparably damaged, creating environments where despair and fear pervade daily life.